The Omen, a rock opera. The narrative, Part 1. Unforgettable. This story is a coming together of two classic tales that have been told and retold throughout the ages, e.g. they are of love, lies, deceit and betrayal on the one hand and violence, death, destruction and transformation on the other, which are portrayed in the music and lyrical content that express our current times. The first part of the story, which is conveyed through the song's lyrics, is of two lovers whose future looks set for marriage, children and all the niceties of an average monogamous heterosexual life. Part 2. Neverland. The devil stirs in his sleep, and he finds himself walking in the forest at night contemplating on the battle that lay ahead, and then the evil begins as the apocalypse approaches. Part 3. The Secret. After a while Richard, the protagonist, grows suspicious as he hears talk of Judy's, his fiancée, dark secret amongst their friends and family, and through his frustration, he is driven to read Judy's diary to find out if she had written anything about her illicit affair within its pages. Richard, having his evidence, confronts Judy, so Judy is forced to end the affair in the waking world, but she asks Robert, her lover, to keep meeting in their dreams, because in this way they could still be together in their romantic, but forbidden love. However, Robert wanted more. He wanted her to divorce Richard and come and live with him, but Judy couldn't pluck up the courage to meet his demands. So she ended their relationship altogether, and they both went their separate ways. Part 4. Desire. In Part 3 of our story, Richard finds what it was that he is looking for when he reads in the pages of Judy's diary that she secretly meets up at night with her lover in their dreams, and she cleverly calls him Mr. X so as not to reveal his real name if someone decided to read about her secret in her diary. Part 5. Judy's Crises. Judy, our protagonist's fiancée, reaches her middle age, and she falls into the negative effects of her midlife crises and gets devoured by temptation. She drops her rendezvous in her dreams and goes in search for the magic that is missing in her relationship. After several affairs that failed, she decides that the grass was no greener. So she pushes down her desires and settles back into her long-term relationship with Richard. Part 6. She is on the run. As time went by, despite Judy's denial and her attempt to rekindle their love, she pretended to go to the shops in the late hours, but instead she visited the local jazz bars, where she had a string of lovers all meeting her wants and needs. Out of spite, she phoned Richard at home and coaxed him to join her and her friends, and when he arrived she was flirting with a plethora of lovers, and they wouldn't let him talk to her. So he shouted above the crowd that she should leave him, and then he left in a tantrum and went back home. Part 7. Killer. Judy returned home at the crack of dawn, and Richard smelt nicotine and whiskey on her breath as she flopped onto the bed, not bothering to get undressed. He confronted her, and in denial, she said that it was her haven, and she ran out of the house screaming that she was going to her lover's, and she wasn't coming back. Once there, she teased her lovers that Richard was a killer, and that he was stalking her on the dance floor, so they were in danger if they danced with her tonight. Part 8. Wrath. Richard went home and patiently waited for Judy to return to confront her without her friends. When she finally arrived, he challenged her about her misbehavior and declared that her illicit antics had to stop, or she would suffer the consequences, confirming her fears by telling her that he would kill all her lovers, and with Judy seeing no way out and in fear of fear, she had no choice but to buckle down and adhere to his misogynistic rules and coercive behavior. Part 9. Deception. As time passed by, Judy outgrew his subjugation and plucked up the courage to go to the police to seek help. She told them what Richard had said about killing her lovers, and that she feared for their lives and her own. So the police put a wire on her and asked her to go home and coerce him into a confession. Once she was home, Richard, having been put on the spot, began threatening her, and he became aggressive. So the police kicked open the front door of their house and overpowered and promptly arrested him for his sins. Part 10. Shadow Play. When in jail and serving his prison sentence, Richard wrote Judy a letter pleading with her to see sense, and he reminded her that she had promised him that they would never break up, and that they could put their differences aside and get back together once he was released from jail, having served his sentence. Part 11. The Breakup. Judy divorced Richard on physical, psychological, and emotionally abusive grounds, knowing that he couldn't fight back, as he didn't have a leg to stand on, and she took him for everything that he had. She cashed in her booty, and she made a huge profit selling the house and all of their belongings, right down to their dog, and when the checks had cleared in her bank, she left town as a liberated, independent, rich divorcee to begin a new life afresh. Part 12. Ghosts. Eventually, Richard was released from jail after serving his full sentence, and being penniless, and having no home, he became a destitute, living on the streets, and he was plagued with his ghost and drives as he tried to get his act together. Part 13. Do you want me? The Christians saw Richard's situation, and they thought that he could be saved from his destitution. And he fell in love with Eileen, a Christian care worker. And his love was reciprocated when she coerced him onto the dance floor at the annual Christian Christmas venue for the homeless, as she asked him if he would like to seal their potential relationship by leaving the streets behind and move into her flat to start a fruitful relationship together. Part 14. The End of Time. It was at this time that the devil rose up from hell, and all about was chaos, fear, fury, and angst amongst the plagues, famine, war, death, and destruction, as good and evil battled it out on the earth for dominion. Part 15. Jump. Claiming minions for his evil flock by possessing famous DJs and musicians to entice their audiences to his evil ways, the devil created havoc and chaos for his victims. Their influence began to penetrate and entice their audiences to the ways of the devil as evil began to rise and weave itself into humanity's moral fiber as they were prepared for the battle ahead. Part 16. Let me out. The devil takes on his role in the revelations as evil begins to rise from the pubs and clubs, and then out into all humanity, and the earth is plunged into evil, chaos, and darkness, as the weak-spirited rise up with their newfound evil powers, and the darkness battles it out with the light as predicted in the apocalypse. Part 17. Eye to Eye. Richard and Eileen's love grew strong as they both discovered each other's passion for one another at a local 1990s music retro bar called The Time Machine. He proposed the very next day to Eileen, his would-be bride, after her seductive dance in the dance floor. Part 18. Here I Am. It was then that Judy heard of Richard and Eileen's forthcoming marriage, and she came back into Richard's life both destitute and penniless, after losing all her money on a 6-month spending spree in Las Vegas. She said that she had made a terrible mistake leaving him while he was in jail, and she apologized as she declared her undeniable love for him, as she begged him to take her back and forgive her. Part 19. Candy. Judy, with her seductive actions, bearing no fruit, caught up with Richard on his stag night at the Time Machine. She dropped some MDMA, LSD, and a potent aphrodisiac into his drink, when he wasn't looking, because she wanted him to rule by her side, so she could become the darkness queen as the apocalypse approached. The effects of the drugs were devastating to his morals, as he was totally overwhelmed, and he fell victim to his drives and bottled up emotions. And then Judy convinced him to take her back to his hotel room for a one-off romantic moment for closure and for a special stag night present. Part 20. Hot as hell. Once Richard and Judy were in the hotel room, she turned YouTube on and played seductive music to put Richard in the right mood for their illicit night of passion. Further, when he was in the bathroom getting ready, she strategically placed her mobile phone on the top of the wardrobe, so that was overlooking the bed, to record them making love. Having got what she wanted, she left at the crack of dawn to go to her parents' house, where she was temporarily staying until she was back with Richard. However, rather than grabbing some much-needed sleep, she posted their amorous antics onto the social media, knowing full well that Eileen would see it and then leave Richard before they could tie the knot. Part 21. Without You. When Richard got home, he found a Dear John letter from Eileen on the coffee table telling him that she couldn't live without him, and that he shouldn't leave her to go back with Judy in one line, and then in the next she wrote that their wedding was cancelled, that his uncontrolled desire had destroyed their relationship, and that she was leaving him. After reading this tragic news, he noticed that she had dropped her diary on her hasty exit, and that she had no noticed her lost. He broke it open and starts reading, frantically looking for answers, which triggered a mental breakdown, and he saw images of breakups in his head until eventually he passed out on the floor. Part 22. Until the end. When Richard awoke, he tracked Eileen down by ringing her family and close friends. And he found out that she was in the local hospital in intensive care, where she had been rushed in because she had been involved in a car accident where she had seen Judy and him on social media on her phone, which made her lose her concentration, and she hit a car that was heading in the opposite direction. He sat there dumbfounded, on the edge of his seat, watching the doctor and the nurses work, as he anticipates some good news of whether she will make it or not. Eileen's friends said that she was being kept alive on a life support machine without his knowledge, and there was a priest by her bedside reading to her from the Bible, for her death was upon her because her father had signed a form to pull the plug. Part 23. Heaven's Call. Richard blamed the devil for Eileen's untimely death, which he had heard through the men of God had risen from hell, and he was spreading evil everywhere, and she was one of his victims. When Eileen died in his loving arms, he never went back to Judy, despite her wants and demands. Instead, he reinvented himself, took up arms, and he became a soldier of God to fight in the holy war against evil at the end of days of the apocalypse. Part 24. When Two Worlds Collide. The battle between good and evil was long and arduous, and there were times when it looked like God's creation was going to be wiped off of the face of the earth, and that everything was going down the drain. However, Richard and the soldiers of God did not give up for their Lord and Master, and the battle carried on. Although most of the soldiers of God perished in the War of Wars, eventually they succeeded in defeating the unholy master, just like what had been written in the Holy Scriptures as prophesied, and the devil saw the end of his days coming into fruition, and his personal role in the apocalypse was over. Part 26. The Elysium Fields. When the war was over, and the sinning had gone, and everyone had cried for their losses, humanity remained, and God rose again, and then there was the first judgment for the righteous and the heroic, who went to the Elysium Fields, where they would remain after their deaths, and went on to live a happy afterlife as they indulged in pleasure. Part 27. Salvation. After the war, and the good had defeated the devil and his minions, and the heroes had gone to reside in the Elysium fields, then came the second judgment, and everyone else who had fought the Lord's battle were judged for their deeds, and the righteous were given salvation and eternal life. Part 28. A new era. Eventually, in the dawn of the new era, humanity returned to earth as immortals, and they lived with Jesus. They searched high and low for their lost lovers, family and friends that were missing due to the chaos and the fury of the Holy War, as they scanned through the social media platforms that had been created for them. Part 29. A new world. After the battle of good versus evil reached its end, and the dark forces were finally overpowered and defeated by God's army, Richard licked his wounds and mourned the death of Eileen, his fiancée. So he decided to pay her family a visit to express his condolences. And when he contacted them through the social media, they explained to him that she had in fact not died in his arms on that dreadful night after all, but had fallen into a catatonic state, or deep state of consciousness, which was mistakenly declared as death, and they explained that she was still at the hospital in a coma, and she was under the care of the nurses and the doctors. Part 30. Till the end of night. Richard, on hearing this ambivalent news, immediately went to the hospital to see Eileen. And after a little confusion, he eventually got past the hospital's security, as he explained that he was her fiancé, and that he wanted to be by her bedside. Once there, he told her unconscious body the truth of what had happened between Judy and himself on that fateful night, and he pleaded with her to forgive him for his weakness and sin, and at that he had an emotional breakdown as he embraced her, and he kissed her lips as she lay on the bed. At that, Eileen's eyes began to open, and she came to. And with a husky voice, she mouthed that she had a strange dream, where she had seen her past lives flash before her, where she had been a string of indigenous tribesmen. And also in other lives, she had been a dancer, and above all in this life God had shown her that Judy had coerced Richard into having sex, and that he was not a cheat, he was a victim, and that she should forgive him, of which she expressed, and Richard's tears were transformed from sorrow to bliss. Part 31. Yes, you are. 2 years later, Richard and his beautiful fiancée were expecting their first child. And Richard expressed his feelings, stating that they were twin flames, and or soulmates, and that they were destined to be together, and he asked her for her hand in marriage, of which she gladly accepted, and they lived happily ever after. Part 32. The Encore. Part 1. After their marriage, as time went by, and the stresses and strains of the Armageddon had passed, Richard went on to form a rock band, where he sang about his experiences of the apocalypse and the love that he held for Eileen. Part 33. The Encore. Part 2. Richard's band became a worldwide success, as everyone that had gone through the turmoil and chaos of the apocalypse could relate to his lyrics. And he went on to create an album and a rock opera that was an outline of the traumatic events and experiences that he had gone through, ending with his whirlwind romance with Eileen and their everlasting love. Part 34. The Encore. Part 3. As time went by, Richard's band was a huge success, and they went on a world tour, and Eileen watched them live on stage in the VIP box suite, and she loved the experience. Then she heard tales of his amorous behavior with the band's groupies from John, who was their roadie. She was devastated at the news, and she arranged a meeting in the car park in the pouring rain where the tour bus was situated. She asked for a confession, and he denied the accusations and he walked off in a strop because he was due to perform on stage. When he played, he couldn't see her in the VIP box, and after the show he found out that she had run off with John, their roadie, and he wrote a song begging Eileen to come home, which he played live on stage hoping that she will return and end his nightmare. Part 35. The Encore Part 4. As time went by, and after he had a nervous breakdown, which resulted in an overdose where he ended up being hospitalized and kept in overnight. While recuperating, he adapted his new song about the breakup, and of his insatiable devotion for Eileen, which he went on to perform live on stage and on TV. As soon as he was released from the hospital, and he hoped above hope that she would see his performance and reciprocate his desire and return. Part 36. The Encore Part 5. Richard's live performance was seen by everyone on TV and the social media, all except Eileen it seemed, and whether it was insight or denial, as she hadn't been in contact with him, he knew that he had to let go and move on with his life. So, he picked himself up, dusted himself down, and did a world tour where he vented out his frustrations in the form of a primal or a catharsis live on stage, all in the name of artistic prowess or entertainment. Part 37. The Encore Part 6. As the tour proceeded, Richard's delusions became severe and even more complex, as he suffered his loss, and they were reflected in his work, which was both solemn and insightful, as he cried out in pain and anguish live on stage at the state of the world and human affairs, combined with the full-fledged apparitional type hallucinations of Eileen displaying her forgiveness, and of his infinite devotion at her return to him. Part 38. The Encore Part 7. After a while, as the tour was peaking, his songs evolved, and they became the antidote for his negative emotions, as he blurted out live on stage in the form of a catharsis in the name of art, that his love for Eileen wasn't being reciprocated, and then she left him, and that he felt like a ticking time bomb, and that he needed help to escape from the situation that he found himself in, for without help he felt like he was burning in hell and was going to explode. Richard, having reached his lowest point over his breakup with Eileen, finally came to the conclusion that she had left him for good, and he started to lick his wounds where he would eventually move on. However, his mixed emotions colored his latest song that he performed live on stage without a rehearsal, and his relentless denial shone through with his melancholic and indecisive lyrics. Part 39. The Encore Part 8. Richard could not cope with the pain and stress that he was suffering from with Eileen's departure, especially as it made no sense at her leaving, and all that he could think of was her abuse that she had dealt him when they were together, and his songs become even more sorrowful as he lived a life devoid of true love, happiness and pleasure, which were reflected in his lyrics. For some reason, Richard decided to heal himself by dropping some speed and LSD when he played live on stage for spiritual and medicinal purposes. The former to get in touch with his spirit guides and or connect to God, and the latter to let go and get over Eileen and move on with his life. The effects were awesome, as he went on a full-on trip and was totally absorbed by the psychotropic images and experiences that were the product of his upbringing and his local and global environment. Part 40. The Encore Part 9. As time went by, Richard's music created a pop culture that had not been seen since the 1960s, and the music affected all who heard it, and the band's performances were at the tips of the tongues of the paparazzi. The musical genre was comprised of psychedelia and punk rock, which conveyed the band's psycho-spiritual values, wisdom and insights that were inspired by the tales on the sound by Nemo, a popular spiritual philosopher. Part 41. The Encore Part 10. Richard was suffering from his personal demons that were brought to his consciousness, and behaviorisms that were the aftermath of his breakup with Eileen, and the only time that he felt at peace was after he had had his daily catharses live on stage. As he did, his psychedelic punk rock sound was so popular that it exploded into the social media, and his band went viral. Part 42. The Encore Part 11. Richard asked through his lyrics to have his memories erased, because he couldn't suffer the pain and humiliation of losing Eileen anymore, and he asks for help from anyone, man, God, or whoever was listening to his plea. The audience were both sympathetic and empathic at his woes, and his need for assistance and guidance, and the tour was a huge success. Part 43. The Encore Part 12. This music video is an instrumental of both rock blues and dystopian beats and melodies that summed up the confusion and inner turmoil that Richard was going through, and the inner feeling that was rising to the surface into his conscious awareness, and he was sure that this time he had crossed his lowest ebb, and that he was on the up and up towards his recovery. Part 44. The Encore Part 13. Richard, having dealt with his inner demons and the untimely demise of the relationship with Eileen, felt that he was ready for his ascension into the Elysium fields to live out eternity with his comrades who had died in battle in the war against evil in the name of the Lord. He expressed his ill-begotten situation and his wish to leave all the pain and suffering behind as he cried out to God for his just deserts. Part 45. The Encore Part 14. The band persuades Richard to go to a local club where they were holding a battle of the bands competition that was being streamed live on the internet. So the band suggested that they go and check the talent out, as they needed a new female backing vocalist, because Emily, their current singer, was pregnant, and she was leaving the band to raise her child. They have heard through the grapevine that a singer could be found at this competition. On hearing this, Richard decided to string along. When he was there, he lost his friends amongst the noisy, bustling crowd when he had gone to the bathroom. So he made his way to the bar, knowing that they will be there sooner or later. It was also an ideal location to watch the bands while having a drink. Suddenly, his concentration became astute when he saw his band live on the stage, and their singer was Eileen. She introduced the band and the song, and she said that she had been incognito learning how to sing professionally, so she could pass the audition and hopefully win the competition too, as that will get her off to a good start in her new musical career. She finished with that the song was her reply to all her loved ones and frenemies who wondered where she had been lately, accompanied with their suspicions of that she had run off with John, the roadie, which of course was a lie, as she will never do, as she loved her fiancé. Part 46. The Encore Part 15. Eileen's singing was awesome, and she was the perfect complement to Richard's lyrics, who up to her joining the band had no idea that she was a rock chick in the making. She sang about the key elements of their breakup. When she sang with her heart on her sleeve. Part 47. The Encore Part 16. Richard was awestruck as Eileen took the stage, and the feelings that came from the lyrics made him feel something ominous was rising to the surface from his unconscious. And he laughed aloud, because everything that he thought about Eileen leaving and her negative emotions were a lie. And he laughed aloud again about the vicious rumors, and at his stupidity and insecurity, because of his past experiences. And then he sat back and watched her perform her new song for the first time. that she had written for the band, and the negative feeling were brushed aside, and he was truly proud of her achievement and/or performance. Part 48. The Encore Part 17. Eileen performed her second song in the band, and it was an instant success with their insatiable audience. She added a pop-rock commercial element to their already popular sound that not only gave the band a chance of even more success with the new up-and-coming youth culture, but she was also a breath of fresh air with her musical addition and natural talent, and tears of joy began to well up in his eyes, and he knew that she was his one and only. Part 50. The Encore Part 19. Richard and Eileen were happily married within the year, and this time they actually made it to the altar, which they had in Las Vegas, and they had the time of their lives expending, gambling and drinking, and they both created a classical rock masterpiece called Utopia, and it soon became the perfect song to end their live performances. The end.